December 6th, 1997, in a remote area of eastern Russia, Vladimir Markov was hunting for wild game. Having had no success, he was shocked to come upon a fresh kill of a wild boar. Armed with his rifle, he immediately spun in a 360, prepared to shoot whatever predator had killed this animal. He was met with silence. After some time and some internal debate, he decided to take the meat from this creature to avoid starvation. He and his 3 dogs would make their trek back to his cabin deep in the woods. He would stash the meat in his shed and turn to head inside. His dogs, however, were preoccupied, staring and whimpering at the dark tree line. Although Vladimir couldn't see anything, he knew that there was something out there in the woods. He knew the safest thing for them was just to get inside of his cabin, so he called his dogs and went inside. 2 of his dogs followed him, but one took off into the woods barking. After that, he would hear the loudest roar that he had ever heard. It seemed like it was coming from far away and close up all at the same time. The dog in the forest whimpered and yelped, and then everything went silent. Vladimir loved his dogs. They were his best friends and companions, but he knew that there was no sense in going off into the dark forest to try to render aid. His only choice was to stay inside the cabin until morning light. A short time later, Vladimir would hear noises outside. Noises like trees being bent and giving way, followed by what he was fairly certain was the destruction of his shed. This cabin did not have windows, but there were certain points on all 4 walls where holes had been drilled out so you could see what was happening outside. As he looked out of one of those holes facing the shed, he could see a large, shadowy creature tear its way into his shed, presumably to retrieve the meat of its kill. He was oddly okay with this. He knew that what he had done went against the laws of nature. This creature was just here to retrieve its food, and he hoped that once it had, it would just go away and leave him and his dogs in peace. After the creature retrieved his food, it sat down near the shed in the shadows and stared at his cabin. After hours of checking outside and seeing that the creature was still there, the weight of the day caught up to Vladimir and he went to sleep. 2 hours later, he would awaken and immediately check that lookout and was relieved to see that the creature was no longer there. Just to be on the safe side, he would check the other lookouts as well. He peered through the lookout on the next wall and could only see dark forest. The other wall, same. Nothing but trees and snow. He would press his eye up to the final lookout and would be relieved that all he saw was trees. But in that moment, everything changed. All of a sudden, a large yellow eye stared back at him. It would be followed by a growl, and the creature took a swipe at the side of his cabin. He instinctively grabbed his gun, stuck it out of that porthole, and fired. The creature yelped and took off into the forest. Vladimir immediately knew what the creature was and the depth of his situation. At morning light, him and his 2 leashed dogs left his cabin and hiked for over an hour to get to his nearest neighbor, Ivan. He stood on Ivan's porch, cold and out of breath, to ask for Ivan's help. He blurted out everything that had happened in the last 12 hours and asked Ivan if he would come with him to search the forest to find his missing dog. Much to Vladimir's surprise, Ivan would calmly respond, no. Ivan would explain that Vladimir had intruded on this creature's territory, stolen its food, and now unless Vladimir moved far away, the creature would not stop hunting him until he was dead. He had been marked. Vladimir was disappointed by his response, but took his 2 dogs and left peacefully. All of a sudden, his dogs would begin reacting the same way they had before. Tails up, staring at the forest, barking and whimpering. One of the dogs would take off with so much force that it yanked the leash out of Vladimir's hand. Despite Vladimir chasing and yelling to get the dog to come back, it did not. Vladimir would spend the rest of his day traveling to 2 other neighbors' homes to ask for their assistance. Unfortunately, at each home, the answer would be the same. No, you have been marked, and we cannot help you. Now, only having one dog with him, Vladimir would head to his cabin in the dark, completely defeated. As he approached his cabin, the moonlight would reflect on the snow-covered ground. He could see that his cabin had been disturbed. His door was open, and furniture was destroyed and outside on the ground. As he approached cautiously, he heard the second dog whimpering in pain, and it was coming from inside the cabin. Instinctively, he ran inside of the cabin to find his dog. After wading through some broken furniture and knocked over items on the floor, he knelt down and found his dog. It was badly injured, but he was relieved to find it alive. His feeling of relief quickly dissipated. The truth is that the surrounding village was correct about him being marked. He had crossed a creature much stronger than him, with more wit and intelligence. He had no other option than to become the victim of the creature's vengeance. The Siberian tiger, more accurately called the Amur tiger, is one of the few creatures in the world that we are aware of that are intelligent enough to set traps and ambush their prey. The tiger did not kill Vladimir's second dog for the sole purpose of planting the dog inside of the cabin so that it could ambush Vladimir from behind. The tiger killed Vladimir inside of that cabin and drug him out, leaving a trail of blood in the snow behind. It took him to a clearing in the forest, ripping his body into various pieces and placing those pieces into piles on the edge of the clearing. This would be the tiger's very loud and clear statement on its stance as the alpha of the Siberian forest. After months of hunting it, the tiger would eventually be tracked and killed, but not before setting traps, ambushing, and killing 2 of its hunters. Rest in peace.